So, there were 6 deadly attacks in Paris last month. Over 100 people were killed and hundreds more were injured. It's been found that one of the key leaders in these attacks was a member of ISIS who posed as a Syrian refugee in order to gain safe asylum in France. So far, the United States alone has lost over 50,000 people in the global war on terror, including the attacks on 9/11, the war in Afghanistan, and the war in Iraq. The death toll started on September 11, 2001, and continued with our brave servicemen and women whose boots were and are still on the ground in the Middle East, fighting for the freedom that our Constitution grants us as American citizens. The 2 main reasons that the U.S. should not allow any Syrian refugees onto our soil are the continuing threats of terror and the amount of money this will cost our country and ultimately us, taxpayers. As the most powerful country in the world, we should not be afraid to confront and stop those who have jihadist views that do nothing but spread violence and hatred around the world. Even though President Obama likes to define radical Islam as solely a form of extremism, everyone else should never forget that jihadists have murdered on our soil before and they must never be permitted to do so ever again. From the attacks on 9/11, Fort Hood, Chattanooga, and even the one in San Bernardino this week, just to name a few. Radical Islamists and their lone wolf posse have inflicted their barbarity across our civilized country, and the attacks in Paris serve as a reminder of the barbarism of radical Islamists. Sharia law and the tenets and practices of Islam completely conflict with the entire message of our Constitution, and those that refuse to give up on those beliefs should absolutely not be permitted into this country. It's true that not every Muslim believes in jihadist ideology, and some have served our country honorably by joining the armed forces and fighting for our country overseas, and even working with federal and local law enforcement to combat radicalization in their own communities, all while they publicly denounce the violent or misogynistic teachings of those radical Islamists. It's unfortunate, though, that their own communities have often defamed and vilified them as terrorists and infidels. According to an article in the Fiscal Times, the administration doesn't have enough security procedures in place to properly vet the refugees and determine if they pose a security risk. Also, who's really to say if someone's been properly or thoroughly vetted enough? The bottom line comes to a saying that's been spread a lot more frequently lately. If someone hands you a handful of grapes and tells you that 2 of them are poison, would you take your chances and eat any of them? No, you wouldn't, and neither would I. And America shouldn't. By allowing Syrian refugees into our country, it's true that we might be helping some, but we'll also be allowing terrorists posing as refugees into our country at the same time. Another one of the many reasons that the U.S. should not grant any Syrian refugees asylum has to do with the amount of money it's going to cost our government and ultimately us as taxpayers. It's almost amusing that there are nearly 50,000 homeless veterans in our country. Homeless meaning that they're not being given housing or anything for that matter from our government. Yet the administration is jumping to spend billions to house and subsidize lifestyles of hundreds of thousands of refugees. According to an article found in The Atlantic, each country would be responsible for 133,000 refugees, which would be at a cost of $2 billion a year. That money is so much better spent on our own citizens, especially the ones who risk their lives to protect ours. America is currently in debt $17 trillion. An article in the U.S. News stated that studies suggest developed nations with plentiful employment opportunities that can effectively bear the steep upfront costs associated with getting refugees on their feet could potentially benefit economically from opening their borders. America is neither oozing with plentiful employment opportunities, nor is it in a position to bear the steep costs of getting these refugees on their feet. Sorry.